Hey, I'm Steve Arendt, and this is the Better Lives, Better Business podcast, where we do the deep work and the hard work together. The hard work of building better businesses that foster better lives, and the deep work of discovering the values that our business is meant to serve. Let's dig in. Hey, Steve Arendt here. Welcome to our podcast where we explore better lives for better business and better business for better lives. Today, I have a very special guest, good friend of mine, Ramsey Duqum from AABLE Rents, Forcey Software, and AABLE Logistics. Ramsey and I have been friends for over 15 years. I got to know Ramsey when I sold him his first tent washing machine, so he was a customer of mine. And since then, we realized that we lived kind of parallel lives and we saw life the same way. We spend probably 2 to 3 hours every quarter on the phone, just randomly calling each other, leaning in each other's lives, getting to know each other, sharing our experiences, our successes, our trials, getting each other's viewpoints on things. And it's been a very valuable mentorship in my life. And I'm very excited to bring that to you all here on this podcast. Ramsey, welcome to our podcast this morning. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it, Steve. I also appreciate those 15 years. I look back to the first time that we met. Steve was in an IOA at ARA. It must have been, if it was 15 years ago, 2010. And you taught me a valuable lesson, mate. I was trying to get a good deal on that first washing machine. And you looked me dead in the eye and said, it's worth every penny. And I believed you. And then it turned out that it was a very true statement. And the only reason why we went to a second machine is because we outgrew the first one. That was a really impactful memory for me moving forward. And then what that spawned with our relationship up until this point has been really special. So thank you for that friendship as well as that mentorship.
Well, it's been good. I'm looking forward to moving forward in our new seasons of life, because I know you're in a new season and I'm certainly in a new season. And we're in new seasons. We explore, what's the transition from where we've been and where are we going to go? And you and I have been talking a lot about that. Different words like soul of business come to mind. Certainly better lives for better business for better lives. It's just starting to unfold for me right now. And it's so important for me. Maybe we could just back up a little bit here and you could give us a little bit of 60 to 90 second overview of kind of who you are, where you're at, so we can put this whole thing into context as we move forward in this conversation about business and soul and such.
While many people might already know my business history, it's been kind of documented. I like to share a bit about my journey. Business-wise, I started at AABLE Rents as a kid, sweeping warehouses, rolling vinyl, started in the vinyl department, moving chairs, delivering tables, doing the real work. And then in 2016, I took over operation and shifted it from a budget rental provider into a high-end event infrastructure company. I came into the company, it was really broken. And then in 2012, my brother and I bought the business outright. And then we continued that journey on to today it's been a winding road. It is a winding road that really doesn't stop evolving. But a little bit back before that, I'm born to a immigrant father who was first generation Duqum in this country. 6 of his first siblings came over here and they all have different last names. But they didn't know how to spell the documents when they came over from Jordan to the United States. My dad was the first one here and spelled it the way that my name's spelled. So I'm the only Ramsey Duqum in the world. And we're the only DUQUMs in the United States of America. So we are first, like patient zero, we call him. He's a brilliant man, came over at 17 with $1,500 strapped around his waist. Didn't know how to speak English, but he could read it. And to meet his host here, she told him to stand under the Salem Lights cigarette sign at the airport to be met, because there was no Uber, there were no cell phones, there was just pay phones. Ironically, my older brother, I'm number 2 of 6 boys, middle name is Salem because of that sign that he stood under when he was 17 here. He overshot his ceiling with my mom. He was a nerdy mathematician, engineer, and my mom was a homecoming queen, gymnast, and youth of the year in the state of Ohio. Like a good Arab, when he saw her at his freshman year in college, walk into that cafeteria, he said, "That will be my wife." We know how the story ended. He's got 3 boys from her and 3 boys from a second. So I'm one of 6 boys. And like an immigrant, he helped steer us. My older brother is us 3 with my mom are all entrepreneurs, real estate broker. He owns a management company. My brother and I, what we do. And then with his second family, there's an actuary scientist, a chemical engineer, and a medical doctor. Jamal Duqum. I'm really saying this out loud so he can hear this and know that we're proud of you and what you've done and that your legacy will move on. And my mom is a really special person too. So that's a little bit about where we come from.
That's awesome, Ramsey. I'm listening to your story. Although mine's not the same in terms of my lineage, there are some parallels. Your dad came over here in a world that he really didn't know. And you kind
Hmm.
of fast forward however many years that's been, and he made his way. It sounds like he was able to be successful at some level, whatever success looks like. But, he certainly got six boys and educated them, and they all seem to be doing well. So that hard work made that happen. I can say the same thing about my parents, although they weren't immigrants. They came from a very blue collar family, and I often feel like that they were driven to be better and find more success. So my mom and dad worked very closely together. They were constantly in motion. I mean, physical motion, always moving. And the fruit of that was they acquired a lot of things. Many standards are very successful. So coming out of that kind of hard work ethic where you're constantly moving, constantly doing. You said something earlier about when you were age 12, you were doing the real work. I'm assuming that meant loading trucks and that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, ground level work.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is, you and I sit here as kind of that second generation, and we look at work potentially a little bit different way, where the real work or the groundwork, the loading of the trucks and getting the stuff done has to be done. But we're taking time here on a morning out of our schedules to really talk about something different. How does this work relate to our lives? Not only in the past, but where we're at and maybe the future. And that's a different conversation than perhaps the generation before us could have. You and I are afforded for certainly the wherewithal to have this conversation. You have a software, it's called Forcey, and your tagline is make work make sense. And that's pretty deep. I know that there's lots of dashboards that cut KPIs and all kinds of stuff to make work make sense. So when you come in and run this business, you can manage it a lot better and perhaps do a lot what you used to call that real work, kind of step out of that circle a little bit and run a different kind of organization. It's the sense of real work versus work that has to do more with inner. And I realize that maybe Forsey ties those two concepts together. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. So the make work make sense was really important to us, and I'll explain kind of where that came from. We're in a day and age where like it's kind of pointless to teach kids in school now about the capitals of the states. All you got to do is Google. When that curriculum was made, it was less accessible information. Today's problem is not information. It's not, we have complete access to the world's information. Artificial intelligence, as of like a couple days ago, is now has a PhD level of all principles. Getting information is not the problem. I mean, we dump out of our legacy software systems all the information and we bring it into spreadsheets and dashboards to make sense of it. That's the key to it is making the data make sense. That's where we're at kind of on the higher level. It ties right into I asked our first seat who came onto the system in March. I just texted him like 30 minutes before this podcast and I said, "Hey man, doing a podcast in 30 minutes. In a sentence, what would you want the industry to know about what's coming with Forcey?" And his response ties into your question. He goes, "A system that will provide actionable intelligence for the highest level of informed decision making. If people are not on the platform within 3 years, they'll be running out of time." He understands the value of what the dashboards and the KPIs, where does that information come from, and make sense of it as it relates to other information in an easy, accessible way, and then make direct decisions based upon it in real time.
You use the word seat. I'm just going to back up a little bit. Like you texted your buddy who had the first seat, and basically that's your first customer, right?
Yes.
The guy that helped you kind of get going and work this thing out. So we could look at that as your first customer. You talked a lot about data in that sense. Data is we don't really have to learn the stuff that we learned before, state capitals and such, but this new sense of data, we can get real-time data and we can make great decisions based on that. I'm going to go back to kind of this generational difference that we talked about and pull away from data, the idea of data for a minute, and then come right back at it. Something happened in my life this past week that's really on my heart, and it's making me think, it's fueling me. A guy I know, I've known him for, gosh, 25 years, 81 or 82 years old. He was found dead in his house this past
Mm.
week in the hallway. And this guy owned a business for his whole life, and he was constantly in motion, constantly doing. He would come in on Saturdays and Sundays and work full days when nobody was there. And that's just who he was. He was always moving. So, what really makes me think about this is, he had a nice home. He had a lot of nice stuff, a lot of nice cars in a nicer part of town. But yet he passed in the hallway, and I'm not so sure. Nobody really knows how long he was there. He didn't really have a spouse that divorced, and they were separated. It was only until the last year or two did he start getting back with his children.
Mm.
And his circle of friends was marginal at best, you know. So here's a guy who worked a business and was constantly in motion and constantly doing, and accumulated a lot of stuff only to find death in a hallway surrounded by nobody. And I got to tell you, Ramsey, that just tugs at my heart because I know that we can get really busy in our businesses and run and do and do and do. And if somebody asks us, "Hey, how you doing today?" "Oh my God, I'm busy. I'm busy." And that's your like thing you tell everybody. And your busyness will get you cars and homes and everything else. But what happens at 81, like this guy? And that's what I'm concerned about and really focused in on the work that we're doing here. It's about running a great business, yes, and we can't lose sight of that. We have to do the work, but anymore, that sense of work might be a little bit different definition than our family, our fathers had, or our grandfathers had, because their definition of work was, in my opinion, constant motion. We have to be in constant motion. And as long as we're busy, everything will work out and it'll be great. And what you're saying is, wow, we've got to be more like a doctor on our business. We got to understand the symptoms that are coming up. We got to understand the data that's coming at us so that we can run an organization and make great decisions so that we can make this organization of people work better together, which to me is a much different definition of work than my father or my grandfather had, or this gentleman who most recently passed.
Well, to be fair, and it's not their fault, they didn't have access to that data that we do today, but we were taught by them. And when I hear that story, and I'm very sorry to hear that, obviously this was an important person to you. He ran out of time. We all run out of time. I asked a question on a board, one of the Facebook groups, which are most valuable commodity in your business? There were a lot of data answers, and there were a couple people who said, "That's a dumb question. I don't even know why you're asking it." And that was in the throes of the end of COVID, where resources, people were the most valuable thing in their minds. But now I was like, I got tired of it, and I just typed to a condescending guy. I said, "It's time. It's inarguably time. And how we utilize that and leverage that for our business, but not at the expense of the things in life that are really important." And for some people, their business is the most important thing in throughout all the chapters of their lives. But for the majority of them, it's not at the end. I did tell a story on a previous podcast about an impactful moment in correction, it was 2018, of a gentleman who I was fortunate enough to be on his deathbed for a 10-minute monologue. And he started with, after I asked him how it felt, he started with, "It doesn't hurt." And I said, "No, Charles, how does it feel?" And he recentered and said, I'm sorry, I get goosebumps. He said, "I enjoyed what I did for a living. It provided me the opportunity to." And for that man, the things he went into was his life and his family and what the business provided for his life. So he had a better business, but he had a better life, and he wasn't regretful about it. I'm not sure the man that you're talking about, would he regret, at 81, what he did in his life. But the technology today really gives us the best opportunity. And with AI advancements, with machine learning technology now, the entire world, we are at a big bang of technology right now, like right now. And what that'll inevitably do is it'll commoditize a lot of things that you used to have to. It wasn't a choice. You had to spend time doing it. Literally, not figuratively, literally spend time. where now this information takes less time to capture, but still requires you to mentally action it responsibly and very proactively. Forcey was modeled after the concept that I personally did not want to spend time having to get the very things and truths in the business so that I could have more time to spend with my family. And I really just want to move into I lost my life to AABLE Rents in 2015, July 12th, the morning of July 12th, 2015. It was a Friday. I walked into the business, pulled my logistics coordinator of 25 years to the south gravel lot, and I smelled alcohol on his breath. Like many business owners, I contemplated, because I knew the ramifications of bringing it up, whether to bring it up or not. I did. He lied, and I fired him. Well, as I'm walking through door 12 back to the upstairs office where that was the logistics office, on that walk, I'm processing all these mad thoughts. I'm our project lead salesperson. I'm our operations manager. I handle marketing. And now I know that I'm going to have to handle logistics coordinating and dispatching all at the same time. So you can imagine my heart is beating out of my chest. I walk upstairs, open the door. It's a bomb of dirtiness, papers everywhere, just like his brain. Because historically, our industry takes all this sales information, revenue, puts it down in an hourglass to these one or two people in our logistics dispatch offices, and then disperse it out to everybody in time and effort. It is a tremendous bottleneck. And that's where we were at a growing company in a building that had reached its useful ability to handle our growth. We were popping. That's why he came in drunk. I walk into that door, look over, there's a nest in the corner around a computer. That's where he sat. I called a group meeting with all our department heads, and I brought him up and I said, I don't know what I'm doing, because I didn't micromanage that department. He was the last guy out of a team of two who had 65 years AABLE Rents logistics dispatch experience. I never micromanaged them. I didn't even know how to put tickets onto trucks to produce load sheets. But the advantage that I have was Friday morning, and I had Monday, he had already planned. So I had Friday and Sunday to figure it out. And those guys, that group comes up, and I said, two things are going to happen. One, we're going to figure it out. And two, things are going to change. And in the process of those learned elements, after I'm in the moment of losing my life, I have no life. I'm not married at this time because I'm not going to give my wife and kids anything that I grew up in, a broken business where everybody gets divorced and the kids don't have their parents. In the process of that 15 incredible struggle through hell week of July 23rd week, where we're working 36 straight hours because I, as a salesperson, made a mistake that screwed me as an operations manager, me as a logistics coordinator. Our entire company went into critical mass mode. And we got through that. And that was a battle. And then that off season, I started selling the way I would logistically coordinate. This mindset through the fire of 15 and that break in July of 15, there was this concept that, wait a second, if only sales knew about logistics, then logistics and ops wouldn't hate sales. I was both at the same time. That's where the trucks came from. You know, a lot of people know about our monster trucks that we built with roof racks, 13.4 on the roof, 25.5 on the bed of the truck with a 20-foot trailer. That came out of the necessity because we didn't have enough drivers to handle our, or trucks to handle the load of sales that was coming in as we were growing in 15. So I could get a CDLB driver in that truck. I'm literally contemplating this as I'm taking the jobs, thinking about what day windows I'm able to come in. How many days is the project going to take? We bought a semi because we could, with one driver, move 48 linear feet of flatbed. Our box trucks, they're 26-foot box trucks. I can get 10% more chairs in that truck just with that extra 2 feet because of our racks, and then pull a 20-foot trailer behind it. This all came from the living and experiencing both sales and operations at the same time. And then I did that job and all those jobs from 15 to 22. And then I dispersed that to the group in a system and then moved to this software to standardize people by day, by skill level, by hours in the day, so that we can all do more and less better. I'm 42 now. I got married at 39, had my first child at 40 because I had given my life to that company and I accepted there was a better way. And we have operational excellence independent of me. It's why I can move to this. So God bless that gentleman. I hope he had no regrets. And I hope that all those lessons learned and reflection of people of those generations, because they're great people, they built America. They just focused on work more than life. And I think with technology influxing now, we can do both really well.
That's an awesome story. It almost feels like we're building on the shoulders of the work that they did.
We are.
I mean, you can't discount the work ethic, and they have that. You still have to get out of bed every morning and move forward in your work for lots of reasons. I mean, nothing gets done if you don't do that. But the type of work that was done in the past is different than the type of work today, mostly around data and the ability to manage work differently. And it sounds like that moment where you had to fire the manager, the operations manager, that next year or two was really kind of drilled that whole idea home. Like the old way of doing it, stuff all over the table, the mess is not going to cut it anymore. And oh, by the way, my departments aren't connected. My sales guys are selling stuff that my operations guy can't even put up. So
Hmm.
and I only realize that because now I've done both things. So out of that painful moment, you not only cut ties with the past, the old way of doing things, work hard, just keep grinding away at the same old way, but you went through a hell moment to connect your company and connect it different, the front end with the back end, and you did all these things, and then later in 22, you codified all this in a software, and now you're launching that software out so that you could share that with the rest of the world. That's kind of what that's how I would summarize. That's how it occurs to me what you said.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. I'm interested about, we could spend a whole other podcast on the sense of time and the gift that not only our fathers and grandfathers gave us of working hard on top of this sense of data and managing things differently gives us the opportunity to spend our time. Again, we have a choice, but spend our time in not only business, but other areas of our lives. You had mentioned you're 42 years old now and your first child came at 40. I'm a step ahead of you on that deal. My children, we have a grandchild now. I call it seasons of life. We're both entered a different season of life. It challenges the way we spend our time. You've done a great job of building these businesses and building the software. Where are you going to spend your time moving forward?
Me personally, where am I going to spend my
Yeah.
time? Well, I got, my wife is a rock. My son, I've learned to be present with him when I have the time at home. But I've been giving my life and my time, and my wife and I had this conversation before we started. I said, here's what this really means. And I need your blessing to do this. This is a progression. I learn, retain, and apply like everybody else. First 2 months of my son's life, I just assumed he knew me because I was there during the entire childbirth. My child didn't know me for the first 2 months. I was working so much. And my wife had this sobering moment with me where she told me that, and I went off and I started to cry. And I'm like, I'm doing the very thing that I said I would not do. I was getting lost in it. And I had to go inside of myself and do a lot of soul searching and realize, no, 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 no. By the time he's 12, I've already spent 75% of the time I'm going to spend with him. So I made a conscious effort, a very active effort to be present with him and my wife when I was home. My wife sometimes comes to me and I still make mistakes and she snaps her fingers in front of my face, not condescendingly or disrespect. She says, come to me, come to me, come to me. Because my brain for 2.5 years has been in the depths of theory with building a system that's never been built before, that there was no baseline for. And she, as my rock, has anchored me at home and given me the space and the time while he's sleeping to do and go back into theory, go back into my head. This is an active process. There is no, you just get to the finish line and then you're great. No, this is a daily process to be balanced. And I, full disclosure, have not been balanced. I am sacrificing my time, my life for a system that will then cost somebody money. Now, there's been fun parts, don't get me wrong, but it's not been without sacrifice. But my wife knows that we've end capped it. We've said what our runway, what our plans are. She blessed it, and then I move full force with it and just anchoring myself in home.
Man, for me, that's just so important. I love business. It is so easy for me to get my head into doing the next thing, figuring out the next plan, how are we going to make money. I mean, to me, it's probably my number one drug. I often talk about it like that. And I can lose sight of wife, my kids, my friends. I can be the most boring guy at cocktail parties because I'm just rambling on about my latest invention or my latest business venture or whatever. And I got to go back to my buddy. At 81, I'm scared to death of dying without relationships around me. I think I'm okay now. I've done a lot of work around that, but man, you nailed something a minute ago. It was like, it's just always a work in progress because I still slip back into that. There have been times where I feel like, oh, I don't need to just forget all the work stuff. It's not worth it. It's not worth it at all. So drop that. It's an extreme measure. And that's not the answer either. I've been blessed. I've been called to do business. I've been called to create. And to throw that gift away, I don't think that that's right either. So finding that balance between the relationships in my life and how to live those because they are fulfilling. Those are the things they're gonna remain with me on my deathbed against the gifts that I have. That's the balance. And I think you're right. The time is the currency that makes the balance work. Not only the amount of time I spend at home or at work, that's a pretty simple thing, but it's about the time I spend with myself in reflection, my time I spend in prayer, time I spend talking with my wife, you, mentors, to get a constant perspective.
I think after 2020, like the summer of 2020 in our industry forever changed people. For the first time, we got out of that matrix, that rat race. Now we already know how we got there. We know the fear that we had leading up to the summer of 2020. We all recognize that in the events business. Everyone talked about catering, everybody talked about restaurants, but the first thing that they bastardized and used a political word, mass gatherings of people like weapons of mass destruction. No need to rent chairs, tablecloths, linen tents if you're not getting together. We were the first industry blown up by COVID. What that also did was it made us appreciate life in a summer where we could spend time with our family, when the kids are actually having fun outside and not stuck indoors for those types of weather environments. It was this forever changing inflection point. That was a life changing moment for us as an industry. And then I think the generation now, post 2020, does a tremendous better job of trying to balance life than we did before. People in our 40s, we lived a little bit less than half of our life without technology, post and half of it with. We're the last generation to know what it was like before the internet. After this, no one will have an appreciation for what it was. But I know it's going to get easier. I know it already is easier. It's our job to frame the connection and leave space for the connections with each other. Frame the connection. Our phone connects us to the world. Our computer connects us to the world. We can get lost in falling away through connections with inanimate objects and people that don't matter. We would focus on connecting within our circle. I think that's what we have to next focus on is the connections in our circle, the meaningful ones, not the arbitrary ones online. I follow very few people online because I don't care. They don't affect my life. And I'm trying to be very responsible with what I post online in the rare instances I do, because those who do follow me, it must be meaningful. It must be not the nonsense. And to all those people who want to post what they're eating and post all that stuff online, those are empty responses that we get. That's my opinion. But we're in this digital age that we will fall into a society of loneliness.
That sense of loneliness is so important for me. I get a little aggravated sometimes when people talk about the balance of life. It's such a well-used little phrase. And inevitably, the conversation goes straight to, well, I got to spend X hours at home and I got to spend X hours at work. And if those hours are balanced, then my life's balanced. That's just my opinion. That's how I hear it. I could be challenged on that.
I don't think there's a metric for that. I think to your point, It's a feeling we get, a fulfillment we get. The moment that I realized that we were in control of the perception of time, and this was all post Charles Class deathbed side, the metronome of time does not tick differently for you or I. It's how we perceive it. Think about these words as not cliches. Think about them as actual things. Time is dragging and going slowly. Or when you're super busy, time flies. I promise you the metronome is the same. It's how we perceive it. So I will not, in my circle, post 2020, when I had this aha moment, I will not let anybody in there around me tell me my son is growing up fast. I say, nope, because I don't experience that, because I'm present with him. I am in the doctor's office with him. I am not being busy around him. My phone goes down. And when I get a ding and I look at it, I think 75% by 12. I put it back away. Now, some of those things that I absolutely do have to respond to, but as I'm responding, and I have videos of me, I'm videoing and responding, two separate split screens on my Note 24. I'm watching him as he walks. I'm talking, Axel this, Axel that. This is my reality. It's not meant to be judged, just heard. This is what I've done. And even when my wife now won't say that around me, oh, he was such a baby. He's still a baby to me. He's just in this phase of his life. The past is not real. It doesn't exist. Every second we spend focused on the past is a moment we're missing of the only thing that matters, which is the present. And I've said this before, and I live my life by this, even through my mistakes, that there is no space in a memory for regret where you fill it with a lesson learned. That's all the past is meant to be referenced by. And
Past in the sense of a lesson learned.
there is no space in the memory for regret that is filled by a lesson learned. We only regret the things that we don't view as lessons, unproductive moments. And you and I are the most dangerous people that we are right now because we've evolved. We're like a snowball going through life, growing with experiences, and then we die. We all die. None of us get out of here together. That's okay. But what we do when we're evolving and getting bigger in the snowball of knowledge, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, everything, we're not regretting our past. We're not wallowing in our past. We are learning from it. And then we're taking those lessons to have a better present that provides us the opportunity to have a better future. You are in control of that. You are not in control of the past.
That's powerful. Leaning into the past only in the sense of lessons learned
That's it.
and not shame or guilt or regret, because that's the stuff that just drags me down. And
That's what the devil wants from us. The devil makes you become who you were so you can't advance to who you're going to become. That is a
yeah.
tactic by that side. I am not worthy. According to who? According to you? No. Our baseline is Jesus Christ, God. Of course we're not worthy, but he gives us grace, so we are. And can you imagine as a father looking at your son or your daughter and them saying to you, I'm not worthy of your love? You give them love no matter how they are. They are worthy of everything, every positive emotion.
That sense of worthiness, that's the core right there. And I think as business people, entrepreneurs or managers of business, I sometimes watch people and I've fallen in the trap myself multiple times. And the days that I don't feel worthy enough, my reaction normally is to get really busy, to fill it full of action so that I can, at the end of the day, point back and say, look what I've done. And that somehow makes me feel more worthy. But at the core, deepest level, I really don't feel more worthy. I still feel just as empty as the day when I started. It really boils down to that deeper sense that you talked about. Am I worthy? Yes, you are, but by whose standards? And there's only one. It's the divine power up there. And unless I can get in line with that, I'm going to constantly live my life out of my history of things, trying to always catch up and find out, fill up my cup. Am I worthy enough? Am I worthy enough? And it's going to manifest itself in so many different ways. A workaholic, a drugs or alcoholic or whatever.
Well, imagine if I didn't think I was worthy to progress from a tank guy. The last time I was nervous in the AABLE Rents business was in 2020 when the presidential debate people, they came to Cleveland. They got dumped from Notre Dame and they moved to Cleveland to the Cleveland Clinic Health Campus. I'm on a call with New Bev, who owns Bud Light, who sponsors the presidential debate, the Cleveland Clinic staff, the COO of the clinic. And I'm live designing as these people are talking from around the world on this Zoom call. I have my CAD up. I'm pointing into, because I know the campus, putting there, putting 12 by 50 meter. They're like, let's do a sports bar. I put TVs up. Like, as we're live doing this, I didn't ask them where it should go. I told them where it should go. Get off the phone. They made some really positive comments on the phone. And then the CEO, the Cleveland Clinic asked me to stay on. They said, we want you to organize the debate. I'm like, what does that mean? They're like, I said, do the tents. They're like, yeah, you're doing the tents, but we want you to organize the logistics of the entire debate outside. I'm like, I'm going to have to get back with you. 2020, I had to ask my people for permission. I sat on my couch in my home. I'm like, what? I'm nervous. I'd never done this before. And the moment that I said, okay, what if I thought that I wasn't worthy of doing this? I'd never done it before. I'm not an event planner, but I'm a logistics coordinator. I know times, ins and outs, levels of people, everything like that from my pain of firing my guy in 15. Well, fast forward, I accepted it. And they paid me 2.5 times more money than the event planner who handled the inside said that I should charge. Because I didn't know what to charge for this. It would take a month of my time. What if I didn't think I was worthy? I sat on that couch and I said to myself, I have this nervousness. And then I went back to myself. I said, everything, every single new obstacle that ever's been presented with you, you have figured it out. This is just a new obstacle. This is a real internal dialogue that I have with myself. And then I felt good. I got up, made dinner, and I went to bed. We crushed it. Shipley, who's the production manager from the beginning of the presidential debate till 2020, I don't know if he's still there now. At the end of it, he said this was the most organized presidential debate in history from a tent guy. If I stayed as a tent guy and I didn't think I was worthy to be a coordinator of something that however hundreds of millions of people watched, and I never publicized that. This is the first time I've ever said that out loud. No, I'm not my past. I am the better version of myself. And what if I took that same mentality and I didn't say that I couldn't now do a software? I didn't say that. I said I can. We are not tied to our past. That is a lesson learned to be a better version of yourself in the future.
There's so much there, Ramsey. It's you took the time to look at the past and say, who am I? I am worthy. I have these skill sets. I'm awesome at these things. And you got really clear on who exactly you were, the gifts that have been given to you. You folded them in, you got clear to the people around you, your team, you went to them first, then you went to the client, and you said, this is exactly what I can do, which is not outside the bounds of my awesomeness. And you moved into the future. To me, that's all about life. You took the time to discern, you stopped. You weren't doing what we might call the real work of loading trucks and moving around. You were sitting on your couch. And I get frustrated sometimes because people say, oh, you're just sitting on your couch. Well, no, I'm not sitting on my couch. I'm doing some discernment. I'm figuring out why,
Mm,
why I'm in this funk or what I'm awesome at or exactly how we're going to move forward or what I need to do to keep the people around me moving forward so that we can, as a group and a team, produce a lot more work than I can by myself. Everything about your story, Ramsey, that's how it resonated to me. So it's like I'm doing life and I'm only can do life by sitting and doing some reflection, right? Periodically doing reflection, doing that inner work it takes so that I can actually step out of that reflection and do action. An action that really can move the needle, not just running around in circles. The floor needs sweeping. I'll grab a broom and start sweeping the floor. Wait a minute, not your gift. It's somebody else's gift. My gift is to do this and constantly lean into that because life does move on, time does move on, and if we can continually learn from our past, it's going to make our present better and allow us to see the future and what's possible for us in ways that we never did. But it's only by taking that time of reflection and doing that hard inner work that we can accomplish these big, bold actions.
preach.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
and I think, what you said earlier about this time in our history of things, it just makes this whole concept that we just talked about there explode. I'm going to roll back to this sense of data because I'm not so sure that people understand what data can do for us or why we even need it. I don't know all the ins and outs of Forcey, but I've watched you and you shared with me as you continue to grow it. And we talk about data and how it can make our company run better. Something as simple as in the events world, we've got trucks that run around the city or whatever area that we're in there and allowing those trucks to run as most efficiently as possible. In other words, don't get caught in traffic jams. Don't put four people in the truck when you only really need two people in the truck. Don't pass a stop up that needs something picked up when you're only on deliveries. Do them both at the same time. The old way, when a guy had a bunch of papers sitting on his desk, it was almost impossible to coordinate that because there's so many minute details in that he couldn't have a truck stop and pick something up and deliver something to the next stop at the same time. It got overwhelming. But only now do we have the data available to us and the technology that a gal could sit there on the computer and it tells them exactly what's got to happen. So this little dashboard will tell them, are we on track? Are we off track? What about tomorrow? What about the next day? What about the next day? So it just constantly tells them the ability to mine through that data and then give that manager the tools they need to make those decisions. It redefines everything. It redefines the culture. It redefines how the people work together, whether they want to come to work together. It redefines the amount of profit you're going to make. It can reinvest that profit. I mean, it's explosive in what it can do. If you want to get really busy and put more trucks on the road, i.e., my father's old work ethic, rock on, put more trucks on
Oh,
the
it's
road.
everything you just said is true. No one can argue with that. I used to take those sheets of paper and I would put them by location, by number of people required for the job site. I mean, I came into a blown up area. He was good, but he was okay. And we thought he was good, but he was okay. And we made it great because of all those things that you're talking about. How do you take data? Well, first of all, data comes from truth that happens in real life, operational truth. We have this many three-seater trucks, we got this many six-seater trucks, and each one of those trucks can carry X amount of payload after the guys get in it in a tank full of gas. Well, how do you organize all that data relative to a day by the inventory that can fit on that truck, by the skill level that can be assigned to that inventory on that day, and keep them within a certain parameter of day? Because you could have a tremendously large revenue week and most people shut off their deliveries after revenue. Well, they could have guys sweeping the floor on Friday because there's a bell curve of demand on a Monday, Tuesday, light Wednesday, heavy, heavy, heavy Friday, and then a really light Friday. Well, you're going to have a really light Friday if you're a project-based business, doing mid-level to high level. You're going to have a really heavy Monday because some projects start delivery for the next Saturday, Sunday on Monday, and you got all those projects from the week before picking up on Monday, Tuesday. I mean, these things just happen. And whenever you get into revenue bands, that will define, and then what you focus on, market segmentation, will define what days of the week you peak and what days you valley. And sometimes in the season, you don't have a lot of valleys, but you don't have all the peaks. Think about it this way. As I'm selling, my worst day up in logistics is Monday. Monday, you get smashed. The spreadsheet that we developed out of the pain of 17 into 18, implemented in 19, and then ironically, when we became the market mover top five was in 21, where it was the Bible to us, biblical. You have to put every project on the production calendar. And then our revenue went boom and our retention went boom while everyone else is crashing and failing in 21, overwhelmed, couldn't segment it by the day. We we don't exist in the year. We don't exist in the month. We don't exist in the week. We exist by the minute of the day. Back to the most important time is right now. And if you can assign that time ahead of time, bill for it appropriately ahead of time, connect that time and effort to your sales from the beginning, from jump, the moment that phone call comes in, you have this paradigm shifting process and system that all you got to do is work within it, and it gives you so much value, your people so much value. That's why I was called to do this, called to for the people who are losing their life like I did, called to do this. These are my people, and we started in the least profitable, lowest ceiling vertical, tent and event rental, because it's the most complex. So our system, based on real life, you can have job windows, delivery windows, pickup windows, and the scheduler takes all the other tickets coming in from all your other sales because that process takes into account all the things in ops that we care about. And it will reconcile what best day by least expensive within the windows you provide it. And then fill up a day in a truck and a set of guys and then move to the next guys. It's so that we can do more better in less time. And whatever you do with your extra time, we asked a guy at ARA, what are you going to do with your extra time? He goes, I'm going to go snorkeling. I'm like, cool. I wasn't at that demo, but they told me about it. Because in the end, it is all about time. Because like your 81-year-old and like I don't want to use names in my own life, we don't get out of this thing alive.
It just sounds like as the leader of the business, put your business hat on. I've got X amount of resources any one given minute. I got X amount
Yeah.
of guys, truck drivers, tent installers, managers, whatever it is. And if I can make them most efficient in that minute, that's going to bring profit to my business. That's going to drive my culture. People are going to have purpose about coming here. They're going to know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And all the pieces of my business, the cogs of the gears in my business are going to mesh if I can maximize the efficiency of the resources that I have. It's when we get out of whack and those resources are asked to do too much or too little that all those other cogs in the wheel kind of fall apart. Culture, profit, everything else.
And yes, exactly. Those are the outputs for not reading accurately and segmenting the inputs. But like Forcey doesn't, and this isn't about selling Forcey, this is about life, but Forcey doesn't just track data. It logs the truth behind every job. It gives the owners the ability to speak the language of labor cost to revenue, profit per job, not guesses, real margins. Overtime reports who's going long and why. Job time logs, how long were you really on site and what did it cost? Utilization reports, are your trucks and people being used right? Sometimes, especially moving forward, demand is diminishing. Right now, we're in a time on a valley of demand in the business. Everybody's feeling it across the country, with very few exceptions. We've talked to people all over the world, actually. We've talked to people as far as Australia with Forcey demoing Forcey. It brings all those operational truths up to the front, allows you to sell them ahead of time, and then action them and reads the delta between the budgeted time that you sold and the amount of time it actually took. I could not fathom the wasting of time logging actions that you do every single day. Because, Steve, you know, in our business, we don't do anything really hard, even at AABLE Rents level of design and implementation. We do a lot of things a lot of times. And we put those boxes around the roles that we do within our business. And then we just, like an orchestra conductor, bring those boxes and make a job. You don't need all high level guys on a job. You need some high level guys who can lead the crew, and then you need your worker bees doing the work with the high level guys, or one, because those high level guys cost you more money. They should be billed higher. A high level guy is not needed for a 40 wide or a 30 wide at our revenue bandwidth. So if we're putting those high level guys because the demand's down, well, we're not optimizing our sales. We need to sell more. And all of this stuff is true. The question is, it hasn't been a question of whether it's true. It's been a question of could it be planned for easily? What it does is you work your process through the system and it's automatically logging the actions, which are associated with cost times the multiplier of time. And when we consume that data, consume pay rates, know when you're in overtime and you're acting Mrs. Jones on Friday at overtime, well, Mrs. Jones actual is going to have a 1.5 times multiplier on your labor cost when Ryan's actually doing that job. But say that we took Mrs. Jones in January for June, and Mrs. Jones at that time, the capacities were below the 40-hour threshold for that level of guy. The people who book after Mrs. Jones, the system knows where they're at capacity wise and starts billing the other people to make up for that overtime because your company only has a certain amount of capacity. It's true.
I'm going to go back to something you said earlier and what you just said there. You're giving the owners the ability to speak a different language,
Speak one language.
speak one language.
They have the same language between operations and sales instead of why ops hates sales. Sales only talks in money. Their numbers are based upon money. Go to an ops guy in our industry and tell them how much money they're making. When they're tired, they speak in time and effort. You have to sell time. Effort's a byproduct of how much hours you work and the amount of workload coming in, but you have to sell time as part of the sale. Time is the overarching thing we need to be selling, not the revenue that makes up the time as the number one. Inventory by nature takes time. At AABLE Rents, we value the time by person at a minimum threshold. And once the inventory, the dollar amount of the contract goes over the time that we spent, now we grab onto the inventory cost. But if the inventory cost goes below the minimum threshold of what we need to bill per hour at that time because it's overtime, then we raise our floor on the contract.
What occurs to me that like hit and reverse and everything you said, there's a foundational truth here that has to be addressed in order for your whole system to work. I very often see people start a business and they will go very hard and they'll grind away to start this business in the first year or two and they'll find success. And then they start hiring people around them to deal with the growth. And they start struggling because the people don't seemingly work as hard as they do, or they're not getting the profitability per man hour that they used to get when it was just them or two or three people. And they wonder why that's happening. And very often it's happening because they don't have processes in place. They just assume that any new person coming onto their business is going to automatically know how to do a particular task. So, like magically going to know that, and they expect that to happen. So, taking the time to write the process down, document it, and then train it and constantly get it better does not become a part of the vocabulary. And often they meet with kind of a brick wall there. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And without doing that, it becomes difficult to scale, to either get the business bigger or more profitable or both. And you talk about this sense of every moment counts, but you're also assuming in that there's process in place for a company that they know how much time it takes to put a 30 by 30 tent up, so that the data that's input for your data, like how much time does it take to put a 30 by 30 up? That's part of what the computer is going to consume to give you an answer. But unless you know that, you don't have a starting point.
Well, amen. That goes back to your first point was that they hit a wall generally within 3 years. They're the new hot ticket. They have brand new product. They rent it for cheaper than everybody else, and people get new product at a lower price. Well, where they make their wares in our business is on the second and the third turn of that product. Can
Yep.
they afford to buy the second run of that 30 by 30 tent and still have that satisfaction at that same price? It's a lot easier when you're the only one doing it. It's a lot easier when it's you and your family doing it. But it goes back to the evolution of man or woman that if you're tied to that person who generally was a technician who started the business and then needs to turn into an entrepreneur who sees the future to lead the new people that come in who are technicians, if you can't evolve that, if you think you're stuck where you started, then you will die. And you'll put an auction online saying, I need to get out quick, and you'll fire sale that stuff, which is generally at B and C grade because that's where you can't do your second turn on your buys. It is tried and true across the industry. But once you understand that yeah, you're going to start as a technician, but I'm going to learn what it takes to be a leader of people. We say we lead people, manage process. If you don't have process because you're the one it's all in your head and you don't document it, you can't even manage the process while you're not wanting to lead the people. And then you hit that wall. I mean, that is something that happens every year. Baby boomers who are selling their business because they ground and they kept going, but they didn't have a process. I'm going to go back to a company that I talked to in the beginning. I showed this to him at Matra 23. He's the one who said this is paradigm shifting. One of the most intelligent people I've ever met in rental. His name is Marty. And Marty, if you're listening to this, you know I love you. He started to cry and he's working really hard. When he saw what it does, and I said to him, this system learns your people. And he looked up to me with these wide eyes under a grand trip tent. And he goes, so you're saying when I sell the business, I don't have to stay on for 3 years? And I said, no, Marty, you won't have to stay on for 3 years. It's part of your IP that you sell to the next person. It knows your staff. You have data on how long it takes per inventory type. And tears started rolling down his face. And then I got this wonderful text that I posted on Facebook as we were marketing this. And he knew what it would become.
That's powerful. It really does start way before any software. You've got to get the processes together. You've got to put the people around those processes. You got to get them excited about coming to work for you. Those are all skills of an entrepreneur that they got to learn. And you can only learn those once you get through startup, because the skills that get you through startup are all about grinding. You just got to do what you called the real work in the beginning of our podcast, right? You got to get there. You got to sweep the floors. You got to drive the truck. You got to do, you got to. But at some point, that brick wall is coming and you must change your leadership style. absolutely must change it to do lean into those things called process and culture and people. So you have to change if you want that business to be like Marty was talking about. You want some value to be when you go to sell that, it's got an exponential value for you. Or if you're not going to sell it, it gives you a, and you decide to make that a lifestyle business, that every moment that anybody in your business is doing that business, every single moment, it's maximizing profit for you. So it's okay to be a lifestyle business, but it's the same thing as scaling. It's about the data, it's about the process, it's about the people. And all those need to come together and use the entrepreneur. You must change your leadership style and you must be open to learning from the past and leaning into the future.
And here's the good news. A tremendous amount of younger generation are coming into the business and viewing it that way, very unemotionally. They understand pride. They're entrepreneurs. They're
Yeah.
not generational operators stuck in a previous way, pre-technology, a better way. We have a phrase at Able Rents that we'll never accept an answer followed by because that's the way we always did it. Never. We call it nay, nay, no exceptions, no excuses. Nope. If you're coming with a new idea, better add on from the lessons learned from the past to be better than we were before. And we will not be anchored to the way it was for the sake of being anchored to the way it was. My uncle, I grew up, who led this company into the ground, was stuck in the old way. He learned it from his dad, World War II vet,
Yeah.
intelligence. So, yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
Ramsey, you really have taken the software and everything that you've learned from really kind of startup all the way through very mature business, and you're wrapping it up in this thing called technology so we can lean on this for the future. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and maybe specifically, in 2022 you had this moment of wow, the software now and the technology will allow all this to happen.
Well, the foundation of Forcey was our 55,000 formula spreadsheet that allowed us to be top five market mover through ARA in 21. And we implemented it heavy then. And then in 22, we realized, wow, this should be a software. So I went on the process of building a team and we hired that team and really engaged last week of May 23. And then there was a moment in October of 23 that I got my bag group on the call and Matt Mutton was on there too. And they see what we had built. So we built our labor app. We built our production app. That was our North Star. And he had this really sweet moment where he put his head down and he goes, "This is awesome, but I wish somebody would put it all into one. If you could do this, you could do that." And that was an internal dialogue I had with myself leading up to it, because in the process of leading up to it, we would get what we call shock boners. It was a lightning symbol with an eggplant we would send amongst the team when we realized, oh my gosh, we can do this. No, I mean, this certain little feature, this certain little feature. So it started a whole next generation, and the screens literally went blank again. And then we had to do a full ERP. And in that process of doing that full ERP, as the designer of it, I hit moments where I'm stuck. And one of those nights I was up with my wife. Our baby was born September 2nd, 2023. It's November 29th right now. And I go upstairs and I'm laying at her feet, tickling her feet as she's rocking the baby to sleep. And I said, "Baby, I'm stuck." And she goes, "Go outside and walk." And get unstuck. And it was freezing cold. So I went outside, got my full snowboard, put my earphones in, listened to this creative track that I have, and I tried to fall into my thoughts. Well, it was dark. We live in the woods, and I was thinking about animals coming and getting me. So I went back inside and I go grab a machete, and then I start walking and thinking until 45 minutes later, and my neighbors must have thought I was a lunatic. 45 minutes later, I have this aha moment of the dispatch screen. And it just builds in my head. I called my UI guy. It was 10:22 p.m. I remember the time because I looked at my phone. And by the next morning, I had a mock-up of it. And that is what is in Forcey right now in the dispatch screen. It brings all things into one. And that was that immersive thought that got me unstuck, is living at that desk in my logistics office. And I need this, and this in front of me. So yeah, that was a really crazy moment right there.
And there's so much in that because not only you're bringing together, a whole lifetime for yourself, but you talked about Matt Mutton and your buddies, your peer group there. You had built this thing in a handful of months very quickly. and they looked at you and said, "That's great, but it'd be awesome if it did these things." And you were taken back because it meant for you, you had to kind of blow the whole thing up. And
Yeah, we did.
and what you found out later was that meant start over.
And
So
we had started marketing it in June of 23, and we were launching for IFAI 24 and ARA 24. And we blew the app up at the end of October and had a new. There's a moment where I'm walking down the steps because I have to now take this labor app that assigns job tasks to trucks and people, very manual process, and figure out how to auto schedule and retool the job information like the sales flow because we didn't even have sales flow in our other app. It was just about labor, like the production calendar. But we're already moving the marketing machine to launch. So by the grace of God, and we were sprinting. This team worked, and I've been working 15 hours. I have food in my office, so I don't even go outside of the office. I'm literally glued to my screen 98% of the time, just managing all these people who are now our devs and our team. And we had a working model that got people really excited, ARA of 24. And then Matra of 24, we turned skeptics to believers because it was fully functioning and working and auto scheduling with time stops and windows. And then ARA 25 is where people started to sign up. And we're launching this year in 25 with this concept. And we've just had this has been exhausting, but thrilling at the same time. And that's where we're at right now.
I mean, it sounds like a total team effort, not only the people that you hired and your developers, but the people around you. Hey, great, but you need to do this, and you've been able to bend and bob and weave and flow with that to where you're at today. You talked about earlier, it's not a commercial for Forcey, it's just the language that we're using to talk about better life for better business and better business for better life. It's just a reflection of a lifetime lived, really, Forcey. Sometimes as business owners and entrepreneurs, it's really easy to slip into a conversation that talks about I did this and I accomplished that. I opened up three businesses. Now I developed this whole Forcey thing and it was great. We did it quick, and it can come into a beat your chest moment. And that feels good sometimes, but taking a step back and like you talked about, really just reflecting on your past, not as regrets, but as what was life lessons for me. I can tell you in my own life, I look back and there are things that happened that I can't explain. We're going along and maybe the business was down or whatever, and something happened, and it made us take a right turn that ended up to be an unbelievable gift. And I had nothing to do with that. You might call it happenstance, you might call it a miracle, you might call it whatever, but there's enough in my life that I'm a little bit humbled when I start talking about how well I did. And I know that in listening to your story, there's been some pivots there, there's been some different changes. I know your outlook from a divine way. How does that resonate with you?
Well, God is the ultimate truth. The Bible, 40 men wrote that book over 1,500 years. And those moments where things just shouldn't happen, that are miracles, that we don't know why they happen. One that pops into mind for me, a miracle was in 92. One of our guys brutalized a woman on a delivery. And literally, God bless her, name was Marie Stevens. You can Google this. It's AABLE versus or Stevens, Stephens versus AABLE Rents. And she almost died. And she was permanently handicapped from this attack. And to skip to the end, just to tell you what it is, AABLE Rents versus Stevens changed case law on how all businesses, field service, delivery service, hire in the country. We're the reason why you have required drug tests and background checks. So we won summary judgment against her, and I don't feel like that because God bless her. Our attorney's a high profile law firm, won summary judgment because no company had ever been found liable for the autonomous actions of an employee out on the road on a delivery. He and another gentleman delivered a rollaway bed to her house. The guy went back into the house and did this. Well, the other guy knew something was wrong and called back to one of our logistics coordinators, one of those 65-year guys, and said something's wrong, call the police. So we won that because there was no case law for that. Well, she rightfully took us to civil court and we lost in 1995, where we were the first company found liable for those actions. And my grandmother at the time, this is not public knowledge, we had $3 million of an umbrella coverage. The judgment was for 4 million. We were $1 million short. And the president at the time told my grandmother, give her the keys to the business. We can't pay the million. Well, this is one of those God moments. She drove out to her lake house, which is an hour east of the shop, and fell on her knees and prayed a very simple prayer. God, please find a way. If you want us to have this company, make a way. I cannot ask you not to pay this woman. And she rose in peace. And the Bible says you can only find peace through him. She comes back, and a week later, the insurance company sends an extra $1 million check to the law firm that sends it to her to make up the difference. And AABLE Rents could stay in business. It occurred to me about 3 months ago that that same company that changed background checks and drug tests law is the company that was the foundation. That prayer and that miracle was the foundation. Forcey, a accountability app and an integrity app, that while you're punched in, there's full visibility around the company. There's serendipity in that. And when God has these moments with you and you don't know why, who are we as the mice to question the maze maker while we're in the maze?
That's powerful stuff, Ramsey. I can't explain things like that. Who would write $1 million check when they don't really have to? We can maybe build some logic around that or whatever, but at the end of the day, they didn't have to do it. And they did. In hindsight, it becomes a little bit more clear as to why that happened. But all we've got is gratitude on that.
Amen.
Just look back and say thank you and move on. And gratitude is not regret. Gratitude fills the soul. I've been searching my soul a lot about this podcast and the Better Lives, Better Business, Better Lives. I'm full of gratitude for everything that I've been given. My parents have mentored me, they've shown me, they've guided me, they've gifted me to get where I'm at. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, completely awesome. God bless both their souls at this point. People around me, men got in my life as I made this entrepreneurial journey. They challenged me to be a better husband, to be a better son, to be a better friend, to be a better father. They coaxed me through that. I've got involved with an organization called EO. The EO really showed me how to become a better business person and challenged me on that there is a life outside of business and both of those two things could coexist. So I have so much to be thankful for. And it is my hope that I can continue to attract people like Ramsey in my life, that we can have conversations like this on our podcast to really kind of unfold, dive deep into things, wrestle with things so that we can find a tribe of entrepreneurs and business managers throughout the world who really want to live this life. They're going to become better in their business. And when they can get better in their business, it's going to provide them everything they need to become better in their lives. And this whole thing becomes circular. And the more I explore this, the more excited I get. And I am looking forward to the future and building this tribe of people across the world.
You remember when you called me and you're like, hey, this is during COVID. You called me and you're like, I'm thinking of getting out and moving to something else. Do you remember? I remember I was standing in my office. It was late at night, looking out to the front, a parking lot through my window. And I remember I said, you're an industry treasure. I said, you were the first one who decided that we were going to mechanize something to make it easier. I mean, I'm talking about on a mass level with your machine. I said, you cannot take your brain out of this industry. There are so few people who are innovating. We have other operators who are doing it. We had software legacy companies who took their lessons learned from rental and brought it in. I mean, I told you, you are an industry treasure. And I said, just wait. After you get through COVID and people realize that the labor resources, I said, your machines are going to sell like hotcakes. Do you remember this?
Yeah. Yes.
I said, please don't leave. You'd be leaving right before the boom. And then it did what?
We quadrupled since then.
Boom. So for anybody who might just have thought that you as an individual, you were the literal guy who started this. I mean, we're a tent industry, and in the history of the history, no one, at least domestically, had ever automated a process that you did. You've mentored so many people just through your work, and your reputation precedes you, sir. And what is our ultimate goal? Is to build our reputation so that we don't have to continually explain and let our reputation do the work for us. And you have gotten to that threshold. So I'm very proud to know you. And I love you, man.
Man, I love you too. The words, you're always lifting me up. I appreciate that. Like all of our conversations, you and I could talk for another hour. I wrote down like six more notes here to talk about, but in the spirit of honoring everybody's time, I think we should probably bring our conversation to the close. It's been a powerful conversation for me. It's been a great time. I really appreciate it. Let's lean forward and keep moving.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, have a great one all. We'll see you.